Welcome to the WagerTalk Podcast for the week ending April 14th. We've got a big show tonight as William Bernanke joins us from CG Analytics, and he's going to tell us how the Final Four went and the championship game on Monday. We're going to have another edition of Handicapper's Corner, a little T&A with Ralph Michaels, and earners and burners in baseball so far. Ralph Michaels, Dave Cokin, and myself will break down the NBA playoff preview for you. And we've got Mark, of course, best bets at the end of the show. Almost forgot that. We've got Mark Seidel behind the controls.
Big head.
Yeah, that little reference was to the fact that Mark got a little spotlight on the Showtime series action, and he's walking around here strutting like he's a star now. And
he is a star. He convinced us he is a star. Yeah, it's just...
We got him, and then I've got we're going to have Will Bernanke bring him in a second. But before I do, Ralph, I got a special deal for everybody listening to us this week. You know, because we've got a superstar, behind the controls, and that we figured that, Mr. Big Shot, we should give some money away.
If they buy a package, they get a Mark Seidel autograph?
I don't know. I mean, that's, I think we got to go like a season package for that.
Okay,
because he's really big time, But how about we just give everybody $10? If they use coupon code playoffs10, $10, you can use it for anything at WagerTalk. And speaking of talking about wagers, let's bring in our first guest tonight, and that is Will Bernanke from CG Analytics. You can follow him on Twitter at the Moneyline Guy. Will, how are you? March Madness is over. You don't really get much of a break because it's Masters Week. We'll be talking about that in a second, too. But how did the Final Four work out for you guys? Did you catch your breath?
Oh, yeah. Definitely caught my breath. And as I told Mark before, congratulations, Mark, by the way. Being on that show, I didn't get a chance to see it. And as I told him, I caught up on my sleep. And we did very well in the Final Four. I mean, it couldn't have went any better. The handle was solid. We made out well in the semifinal games, the side and the total. Auburn covering was and not winning was huge. The fact that they didn't win was a pretty decent swing for us because we had a lot of some liability on Auburn money line. Despite the line move going the other way, we had a pretty heavy ticket count on them to win the game. And then Texas Tech winning outright as well. A lot of Michigan State money came in late, even though that was a sharp move early in the week.
Continuing on with just the Saturday games before we get to the championship game, both games flew under the total, but if you looked at the matchups, those sharps, I think we're probably expecting it. Did you get hurt with both of those games going under the total, or did the sharps take some of that money back?
I thought we would get hurt because a lot of bettors are privy now to the fact that these big arenas, these football stadiums, it's harder to shoot, and there's a tendency to be some under, especially in the first game in that venue where teams are not really used to that. Second game, obviously, be a different story. But even with the sharp money, public bettors came in on the overs right up until tip, and we did very well at both totals, staying comfortably under the totals.
Will, we saw on Sunday, on Monday, Virginia opened up at 1, and then we saw it get to 1.5 at some places, and it pretty much sat there for the longest while, and then we saw that late rush Monday night, shortly before game time, and around town, most of the books closed at 2. Was that late rush public money or sharp money, and how did that result end for you guys?
This was one of the most confusing games to read on the day of the game. I couldn't get a feel for what was coming in. Were we getting some sharp money? Obviously, we got some sharp money, but then you'd have bettors beyond the same side as the sharps, which usually doesn't happen in the big games. That would happen on like a NFL Sunday where the Jets are playing Jacksonville in Week 17, but you never see it in a game like this, and it seemed to be the case where sharps were hitting Virginia, and we talked about that, I think it was last week, where we felt Virginia would be a value side for sharps because their look-ahead line was 3.5, and we ended up opening, of course, at 1. So that was the case. But public bettors seemed to lean towards Virginia the closer we got to tip, and it was mostly public money, and we took a small loss on the game. I guess I can't argue with these bettors taking Virginia as they got a nice short number with a team that's basically walking on water.
Just continuing on with that question, did Did you do better with your props season long, or those that bet them before March Madness, with Virginia winning, or would you have done better with Texas Tech winning?
The
futures.
We had a higher ticket count with Virginia, so Texas Tech winning would have been better overall. Not by much, but it would have been better if they had won the whole thing from a futures aspect. But the Virginia ticket count was pretty high, so it wasn't a terrible thing, but Texas Tech winning would have been better from that aspect.
We talked about those totals being so low and flying under the total on Saturday. So props, I didn't think you guys would open a number like 120. In my mind, I thought you would open about 123. And then we saw it dip to as low as 117.5, and then up in game time, I think it got up to 119.5 at some places. We were watching over at the Superbook with all the WagerTalk guys and Kelly in Vegas. So, that's the only thing I was keeping an eye on. How low did you go? How high did you go? And what was the final result for the total at the end of the day?
Yeah, we got down to 117, I believe, 117.5, and then 120 was, of course, it opened that as the highest, and closed at 119.5 there. The first half line got bet up too. I think 53 to up to 53.5 to like 55, if I'm not mistaken. I have to look it up again, but somewhere in that range. And it wasn't a very good result for us. We needed the first half and full game under, and of course it looked good for a minute there, but then just the floodgates open. So yeah, in retrospect, we probably opened it up too low, and should know better in the future. A game like this, even if you open up on a high side with two defensive teams, you're still going to get blind over money, and usually you just want to protect yourself for that happening.
Will, with the props, you guys had extra props, obviously, for the championship game. How was the handle on the props for the championship game? And could you tell us what was maybe the single best prop for the house and the single worst prop for the house?
Sure. Yeah, the handle on props was okay. It wasn't great, because we didn't have the star power that we would have had with some of the other teams being in there. Duke and Carolina, Kentucky, and even Murray State wouldn't get there. But if they did, John Morant would have taken a ton of props. But yeah, it was okay, but nothing spectacular. And as far as the results, the best result for us were the tri-bet props. To win by this, the three-way. We had, I think, a couple of those. And the worst result was the total points scored by Virginia. Surprisingly, over 60.5 was one of the bigger bet props. I was shocked at that, but I guess it correlated to the total in the game.
We talk about your app all the time, and one of the best reasons to have the app is in-game wagering. And, this game had back and forth and lead changes, and Virginia went out to a 10-point lead, and Texas Tech comes back. How did you do on in-game live wagering? And, tell us what the overall handle was on that percentage-wise, if you have any idea.
Yeah, the in-game wagering was very solid, especially with the game, plenty of runs in the game, and then also going into overtime. That just gives us an extra, a few, 15, 20 minutes or so of more handle. So we did really well with in-game. It was about 15% of the total handle in the game. So in that range, which is on the high side for a big game. And it was great, though. The handle was great, and we took a small loss on in-game, but we'll take our chances with that anytime we can get it.
Will, when you have a game that's going back and forth the way that game did, do you see more of the sharps jumping in? Because with the lead changes back and forth, you can end up grabbing, positive EV positions on, both sides. You can end up actually leveraging both teams and, put yourself in a positive situation.
Yeah, sharps usually weigh in at the timeouts because then there's no chance of any delayed feed. That's one thing. There can be problems, depending on where you're watching the game, of course. Each provider has a different level of being up to date. But, yeah, they jump in at the timeouts. And, a couple of sharps from what I saw had a position where they had Virginia, I think, at like Pick'em. And they had Texas Tech, I think, at 6.5, 7.5, some in that range, and they just missed winning because, of course, they ended up winning. Virginia was it by 8. Yeah. So that last shot was actually a big shot for some in-game bettors who were trying to do a middle there. So that 8-point, 7.5-point middle didn't come in, but it was the right play, that's for sure.
I know golf's not a huge game that a lot of people bet on, but I think like the Daytona 500 or the Kentucky Derby, it's an event, and people think about it. Now, I love betting golf. I love watching golf. The Masters is underway, and there's some low scores that got shot Thursday afternoon as we're recording. But can you tell us some of the biggest bets, who had the most tickets, and any big liabilities? And you got to throw in what the Tiger factor still is at this point.
Sure, yeah. The biggest bets, through up until I saw through lunchtime today, were $5K on Rory McIlroy to win it all, and a couple of $2K bets on Tiger Woods. So nothing, huge. I think we'll see some bigger bets this weekend because we keep those odds up or adjust them accordingly in some matchups. But the most tickets right now, tickets written, Ricky Fowler was number one. Tiger, Rory, Tommy Fleetwood in there. Surprising name. Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Matt Kuchar, and Jordan Spieth. They're all like neck and neck with their ticket counts, but I thought it'd be good to include them. And liability, that's right. Right now, Rory had the highest liability, and Tiger, of course, and Brooks Koepka at I think his odds were 23-1 last time I checked. He's tremendous liability on him, and then Dustin Johnson. And
of course, at this time, Koepka just finished his -6 as a co-leader. I left this afternoon -3 for the early groups was the leader, and all of a sudden, DeChambeau, Koepka, and Mickelson are -6, -6, -5. For our listeners and that are our CG customers, do you guys redo the futures and put up odds again starting tomorrow?
I think we do it again after the cut.
Okay.
And then put them up there because you'll see some of the bigger names up, and we'll put ourselves in position where it's tough to put numbers out. When you have some guys that are, whether it be a big name or a smaller name, when they have, let's say, a really lousy round, a Roy McIlroy type of round, and to price them again, and you can get caught with your pants down, so to speak. So, yeah, usually after the cut's made, then we'll reprice everything.
With weather a factor as well. I know today was the only nice day that's supposed to happen, so, you add in weather to that, and it gives you guys something else to have to try to handicap.
Yeah, that's always a big X factor, but we try to use our same philosophy maybe with the British Open because of that weather's always been a factor, and just the same thought process, all of us sitting together and using our past numbers.
Heading to the NHL playoffs got underway last night. Have you guys taken any big series wagers from any of the sharp guys you would consider, or do you have any team on a particular high liability?
Yeah, the sharp sides have been on the dogs. They haven't been as high a bets, but they've been taking them. Columbus, we had a bet, I think $5K on them at plus 360, if I'm not mistaken. Had a bets on tonight at the Carolina, the Islanders, which I still feel was a great play. Where whoever decided to play them, they were like at $1.30 in that range. And what was the other dog yesterday? Dallas. We had a sharp bet on Dallas as well. But our biggest bet, this is hard to believe, but $22K on Tampa Bay Lightning before the series. Not, now that the price is readjusted, I expect to see some more Tampa Bay money as the price is basically cut in half.
Yeah, that's a big one with them losing that first game. What did they peak out at for you guys before game one? Were they in the 400 range?
Yeah, 450, I believe, and then that's when it got bet. I saw even 500s at other places, but that was our peak. Was
the Golden Knight game the highest volume, and was that your biggest moneymaker last night?
No, believe it or not, the Knights was just a mid-level game last night. We've seen there are liabilities with the Knights, but it's nothing like last year. So I think bettors were just kind of scared off of how they finished the season, and they're skeptical of them this year going into the playoffs because that series opened up where they were a $1.15 favorite, basically a pick'em, and now they're a significant dog after losing the first game.
Will, we're 2 weeks into the baseball season. How's the house fared so far in the young season? And I got to imagine with the Yankees and Red Sox, two of the most public teams in baseball, a combined 8-15, I got to think you're walking with a little extra pep in your step with the start that they're having.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say I'm a Yankee fan, but, I got to keep those emotions outside the office. And, the Yankees basically have been a moneymaker for us up until this Houston series. This one they got swept. The first two games we actually needed the Yankees, and they didn't come through even though they could have. In the last game they were they were the liability when Paxton started yesterday, so that helped us. But other than that, the Yankees have been a moneymaker, and of course the Red Sox start, which I think they've been favored in every single game they played this year. I could be wrong, but that, to my recollection, they've been favored in every game, and they've been a huge moneymaker for us as well, wiping out most parlays and anything of that nature. So it's been a great season for us, even with Seattle playing the way they are as well. They're 13-2. They had a comeback win today, which wasn't a great result for us. Early in the year, they were a moneymaker for us because bettors just basically left them for dead. And then when they beat the Red Sox, I think 3 out of 4.
I know your books being at some of the nicest hotels, you don't have the same type of abundance of betting on one team. But is there any one team in baseball? Is it the Dodgers that you always tend to get monies on as a local favorite?
Yeah, it appears this year it's been San Diego. They've been as far as a game-by-game basis. The Padres have really caught on to public bettors, and I believe that's Manny Machado effect and the fact that they've been successful to start the year. The Dodgers are always in play, so that's almost a given. But the Padres are giving them a run for their money as far as local favorite.
Yeah, and you don't have to lay $2 with the Padres.
And you can watch them on TV.
Yes. The Dodgers can watch on TV since the turn of this decade.
Yeah, for people that don't understand that joke is we cannot watch the Dodgers here.
We have 5 teams blacked out here.
Yeah,
5 teams. So, but the Dodgers are the ones that don't even have, even in local TV. Yeah. They don't have every game on TV like every other team does in the world.
That's amazing. Hey, Will, what's happening at CG? Right now it's just off the championship game, but like I said, man, it's a busy week with the playoffs starting in both hockey and basketball. The Masters, you guys don't get any breaks. What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, just to expand on you guys mentioning the in-running, since hockey starts, it started. This is the second night of the playoffs, and NBA starting this weekend as well. Having in-running is tremendous. It's a must-have for all bettors. If you liked Columbus last night, and let's say you didn't play them or wanted to add on to your bet, I know it was sort of a freakish thing, but they were up to plus 1,400 in-game if you bet them after the first period down 3-0, and that's the reason to have in-game betting. You can get value or dollar cost your bets, whatever you want to do. So really, I mean, this is one of the best sports weekends of the year. I love it. Baseball's in full swing. I just mentioned the playoffs. You have the Masters. If I'm missing something, by all means jump in. You got, MLS is going on. So it's a must-have. Make sure you get down to your nearest CG book. Download the app. Cosmo, Venetian, Palazzo, Tropicana, Palms, Silverton, M, and Hard Rock. And you need this app to bet like a pro and to bet in-game and take advantage of these, big-time opportunities you can have in the playoffs with these huge swings.
I can't tell you how many times in college basketball this year there was a team that, let's say, was a 7 or an 8-point favorite. They got out to a slow start. They were trailing by 6 or 7 or 8 the first few minutes, and instead of laying 6 or 7, I'm getting them laying 3, and all of a sudden you win your bet at the end of the game. Or you like a hockey team, and perhaps they were a 2-1 favorite, and they give up a goal and you're down 1-0, but you still have all the confidence in the world. Now you're grabbing them at 70 or 80% better, 80 cents better. So, I mean, there's just so much value that not only are you looking for value in a game, but there's a game that you might have bet that if you're following it in game, you can jump on it and get a much better line just a few minutes into the game.
Absolutely. You treat it like a stock. You buy things high, you sell. You buy it low and you sell it high, and that's what in-game betting or in-game trading, so to speak, is. It's what it is, and it could be your best friend. It certainly could be your worst enemy if you abuse it, but your best friend when you take advantage of opportunities and have your numbers in your mind and whatever, you write them down wherever you keep them, and when it hits that number, you hit the enter button.
Perfect example is the championship game on Monday. The first adjusted line on the total went down even lower than it was.
Yep.
Because they got off to the first couple minutes was a slow start, which always seems to happen in these championship games. The teams are tight, and then as Will alluded to when we were talking in the beginning, you could have got Virginia at a pick'em and had Texas Tech at plus 7.5. Now, that's a middle that people will, dream of, especially the way that game was going.
Especially with a total of 120 or under
the
that.
way that game was going, and fortunately for the book, it didn't fall in there. But I know that there was a lot of sharp people that were holding those two kind of tickets. And even if you weren't holding a Virginia pick'em, if you bet the game early, you had Virginia -1, and you had that opportunity to middle when it got up to 7.5. And I know a lot of people did do that. And that was I heard a big sigh when that last shot went in. I didn't really think at the time what it was, but that was all the bookmakers around town that had in-game liability on that plus 7.5 out there. So good stuff, Will. And yes, this is the way you have to bet these days. You've got to have that app. And it's just, for us, Ralph, sitting there watching the game, you don't want to get out of your seat. Some of us, had drinks and stuff and couldn't get out of our seat. You could just sit there. You got the app in your hand, and you're watching the games, and you're good to go. That's the way you do it.
Marco, if they would have saw you as drunk as you were Monday or as inebriated you were, we had to take his phone away so he didn't live bet stupidly, Will. But that's what friends do, right?
I've been there myself.
All right. At this point, I am going to plead the fifth, Your Honor, and on the grounds of self-incrimination, and we're going to just wrap this segment up and head to break. Will, I appreciate you stopping by as you do each and every week with us. We'll talk to you next week if your schedule permits. And as I tell you every week when we close it out, good luck on all those games except the ones I'm on, okay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks,
look forward to it, guys, and have a great weekend.
All right, guys, we're going to step out for a quick break. When we come back, Ralph and I, Handicapper's Corner. That's up next on the WagerTalk Podcast.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. It is time for Handicapper's Corner. We're going to go with a little T&A with Ralph Michaels. That didn't sound real good. But,
when Kelly says it sounds a lot better on videos. Thanks, Marco.
Well, it would be much better with T&A with Kelly, but I don't know about T&A with Ralph, but we're going to do it anyways. That's Trends and Angles, T&A, and then we're going to look at some baseball earners and burners. But, Ralph, it's NBA playoff time, and you can't talk NBA playoffs without talking zigzag. That's an angle that back in the day, buddy, made a lot of money with the zigzag, but it doesn't zig as much as it zags anymore. And you can tell us a little bit about the zigzag and where it's at.
Late 90s, early 200s, maybe even more than that. I mean, there was so much parity in the NBA that teams had good games and bad games, and teams rebounded from it. But we're seeing a different NBA. I mean, ever since, I don't know if LeBron going to Miami and getting Bosh to come, or, Durant going to OKC and all the free agents now talking and colluding on where they're going. So it's a different NBA game. And for those that think the zigzag still exists, well, here are the numbers from the last 3 years. These are playoff-only records. If you bet a team off a straight-up loss, you're 64-84, 43%. If you bet a team off a home loss, you're 20-28, 41.7%. And if you beat a team off a home loss as a dog, you're 7-14, 33%. So just a couple numbers that, I will mention a couple of situations where there has been profit. Teams that won as an away dog of 4 or more. So you're probably playing a 1 or a 2 seed to be a dog of 4 or more early on in the playoffs. Those teams since 2015, the last 3 years, have gone 8-2, 80% against the spread. Now, there's not many, but you're not going to have many situations where a team is a home dog of 4 or more.
Let me actually stop you for a second. And Ralph, I think you're going to have more of the 4-5 matchup in the 3-6 matchup where you'd have a dog of 4. 4 or more, yeah, you're going to have the bigger ones, but I think if you're going to get them in that 4-5 point range, those are more competitive games where you would say basically
not if you're a home dog of 4 or more. I mean, most
home dog. Sorry, yes. So I thought you said road dog.
No,
bad.
The home dogs.
Okay, yes, then
so
it is
you're
1 or 2.
You're playing the 7s and 8s against the 1s and 2s.
Absolutely, my bad there.
Yeah, and teams off back-to-back home losses off back-to-back losses, and they're a home favorite. So this goes into what we talked about. A lot of that's probably teams down 0-2, and then they're a home favorite and return home. We know the first half angle has been good, but just teams off a back-to-back losses as a home favorite the last 3 years, 17-6. 73.9%, and they've gone 21-2 straight up. So, again, off those 2 losses, that's a situation. Marco, I've got a couple round 1 situations as well. Number 1 seeds off back-to-back wins against the number 8 seed. A lot of times they're sweeps. A lot of times you return back home and you think the 8th seed might be able to do something. But if the number 1 seed has won and covered 2 straight games, they're 30-5 straight up, 24-11 ATS. So if you have that 1 seed that's dominated, now that doesn't mean they won the game but didn't cover. Again, they had to win and cover. Number 1 seeds at home off an upset loss. So if you lose at home as a 1 seed or you're a road favorite and you lose, they've come back and they've gone 55, 34, and 4, 61.7%. So another solid situation. If you're the best team in the conference and you lose one of those games, again, in round 1 against that 8 seed, you bounce back strong. And teams that are an away dog of 4, 0-3 teams that are away dogs of 0 or 4. That means you had home field edge, home court edge. You lost both of those games. You lost the last game. You're on the road about to get swept. Any surprise? They're 3-32 straight up. Yeah. 10-25 against the spread. Those are away dogs of 4 or more in that dog situation. And finally, just something simple that I pulled off from Mark Lawrence. NBA champs of last year, game 1, round 1. That'll be Golden State this upcoming Saturday. They're 17-9-1 against the spread. So, returning to the playoffs after cutting down the nets. Golden State's a little unique because, they do it year after year. But, again, those are just returning champs. Game 1, round 1, 17-9-1. Marco, tell us about some of these early money burners. Now, let's see. I know one of the money makers has to be Seattle in the over.
Yeah, Seattle's been incredible. They are the number 1 money maker in baseball. Just one quick thing. Go and check our videos. We did a bunch of videos again this week, and Ralph and Teddy did some NBA playoff stuff for you. They covered the zigzag and some other stuff. You can check our video library out on our YouTube channel. Ralph, the big surprise of the baseball season so far, we're only 2 weeks into the season, but if you've played the Seattle Mariners every game, you are up for $100 wager. You're already up $1,180 playing them $100.
Was that including today's win as we're recording?
No, I didn't update.
They won this afternoon, so they beat Kansas City. And how many games have they played now?
My record has them at 12-2 so I don't know if I'm updated or not yet.
So one more game, and I think they are 13-1 to the over their last 14 games.
Yeah, this is a team that they're hitting the baseball and they're winning games. So look at them. The second team, the most profitable team, this is a team that showed a lot of life at the end of the season last year, and they've carried it into a nice start this season, and that's the Tampa Bay Rays. They are second in profit if you're playing them at 100 games.
Dave and I... Sorry,
yeah, they're plus 680 on the season so far, and this is a team that's got some good pitching. This is the team that started the gimmick of, pitching they have one of the games where they start a reliever, and it's been very successful for them. They flipped the order. It's causing opposing managers, lineup problems, and it gives them edges, and other teams have started to copy it. We saw that, last year at the end of the season. So Tampa Bay should be no surprise, but team number 3 is.
Well, Tampa Bay, just to jump in, Tampa Bay had that cutesy thing, but when you could throw Snell, Glasnow, and Charlie Morton as your three, and then you go to the bullpen for the fourth, I mean, your staff is, I mean, besides the Indians, you have the best staff. Well, maybe not the Astros, as Mark's looking at me with a glare. Yeah. Besides that, your starting three compares with everyone in the American League.
Then number 3 for the money earners. This one's a surprise to me, and I know my buddy Johnny Detroit's a little happy with this one, but we know this is going to come back to earth. The Tigers, off to an 8-4 start. They're plus 670, playing $100 per game. This is a team, and here's something comparable with these two teams, Tampa and Detroit. Both of them good on playing them on the money line. Both of these two teams, Ralph, 3-9 to the under. Both are dominant, 75% plays to the under. With Tampa, that doesn't surprise me because Tampa's always been about pitching, and they play a lot of games where you're winning 3-2, 4-3 type games. But the Tigers, with their pitching staff, and it's always been a joke about their bullpen, that surprises me that they're playing as much to the under as they are.
Marco, the Detroit Tigers have scored 33 runs in 13 games. Besides Toronto, who has only scored 36, the next lowest team in the American League is the Chicago White Sox with 50 runs, and Chicago's 3-8. Yeah. So they have scored 33 runs in 13 games, and they're a -6 diff. Yeah. So at 8-5, you're going to expect regression with a negative run score diff. But again, you win couple as a dog. You're 4-3 on the road, and you're a big size dog when you're 4-3. That's why they are where they are.
All right, the 4 teams on the bottom. 2 major surprises. One not a surprise, and the other one a bit of a surprise. The bottom 2 teams, and they
the Red Sox. Oh,
Reds. Yeah, we got the Yankees and the Red Sox. Red Sox hoard 3-9. You're down $1,110 already playing Boston $100 flat. The Yankees, you're minus 860. Now, the Yankees, we can give them, a little bit of a pass because, A, they have played, they had to play Houston, a good team, and they're banged up. They're not at full strength. They're starting.
They don't have Chris Sale being 0-3, right?
Yeah, they don't have that. The Yankees have one of the better bullpens in baseball, but they can't get to the bullpen with a lead to save a game because they're just getting trounced with their big hitters out of the lineup. This is a team, the Yankees, when they get healthy, and we're bashing them, and it's because how much of a favorite they are. They're only 2 games under 500.
And they're plus 12 runs. That's the 3rd best in the American League.
So this is a team where if you're going to look and say, all right, who's going to change the quickest? When the Yankees get healthy, the way they've played injured, this is a team that's going to be good. But you're always going to lay a price with them. And even though they're only 2 games under 500, you're down 8.6 units on them for the season. And that just goes to why you can't play on a religious basis these big favorites because they just don't win at the volume that you need them to win at. I don't care how good the teams are.
Dave and I talked about on the radio today the Red Sox. I mean, the Red Sox pitching the way they're playing, they're still a 190 favorite today, and people are betting them. That line has actually gone up. So, people need to realize one season does not carry over to another where it's automatic like that, yes, the Red Sox were so good, and perfect example.
It is, and they're the money burner for sure. I think for Boston, their starting pitching has been absolutely horrid. You can't be any worse than they've been. They have scored runs, though, Ralph. It's not like the team is not hitting it all. They're scoring runs. They just, they're giving up a ton. And this is a team that, look at the over-under. They're 72% to the over this season, 8-3-1. It'll turn around for Boston, but again, they're going to be a big price all year long, and they're not going to be, a moneymaker for you. You just got to stay away from them. But here's where we get into the next 2. And The third worst money burner is Kansas City. That is no surprise to anybody. Kansas City, there's not a lot in the shelf there in Kansas City. They got Junis is, I think, their best pitcher. They just don't. They can't hit. They don't have a good pitching. This is a bad team, and it shows. They're 2-9, and they're minus 760.
They lost again today. I think that's 10 straight losses. And the thing with Kansas City, they've played 12 games, 11 on your record. They lost another today, which makes it 12. 9 of those games were at home. They've only played 3 road games, and they're that far back in the standing. That's when you can't make it up, when you would have to go on the road and play 600 ball, and that's not a team that's going to do that.
Absolutely not. Now, the fourth worst team, this one's a little bit of a surprise because a lot of people, because of the way they played last year and their pitchers, we talked about it, Dave and I talked about this a lot on the radio show. Coors Field, you would expect the pitchers to be worse at home than they are on the road. They'd have better records on the road. Last year, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, John Gray was amazing.
Yeah,
God,
Freeland, will that carry over to this year? Well, so far, things have not carried over to this year. This team's out of the gate, 3-9 to start the season. They're minus 700, playing $100 flat on each game. This is a concern for the Colorado team because they can't afford to fall way behind in this division. The Dodgers are just too deep. And San Diego is a team that has improved. Arizona's playing a little better than I anticipated them to play to start the season. I thought they're a team that was not going to be a 500 ball club this year. They are, at 500 right now. We'll see how that carries out as we move forward. But Colorado was most people's pick to finish second, and a lot of people thought the Padres would be improved, but not enough to overcome the Rockies. So far, the Rockies have disappointed.
Padres, besides Boston's only played 1 home game. They're 0-1 at home. The only other team winless at home, the Colorado Rockies, 0-5.
Good stuff, Ralph. That's going to wrap up our earners and burners. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. When we return, NBA playoff preview. That's up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. Today's segment is brought to you by uwager.eu. Get a 50% sign-up bonus when using promo code WT50. That's WT50. 50% sign-up bonus. This is an exclusive offer to WagerTalk listeners. All right, guys, it's NBA playoff time. And, Ralph, we have in our presence probably the only undefeated NBA handicapper this season on the planet, the one and only Mr. Dave Cokin. Dave, thanks for joining us for this NBA playoff segment. And you want to tell our listeners about that undefeated season?
Yeah, I decided not to do the NBA regular season because, there's so many hours in the day, and I'm a matchup guy, and it takes a lot of time to match up the college basketball games in the NHL. So I said I'm not going to do the NBA. But on Tuesday night, and I missed a play, by the way. I should be 2-0, but, this is how little I followed the NBA in the regular season. I did play Dwayne Wade in his final home game. That to me, this is just a gift, an absolute gift. I didn't think there was basically any chance that this game was going to lose. If there was above a 5% play at WagerTalk, I would have made it. Above, I'd gone 6 or 7%. That's how strong it was. I played it for quite a bit myself, and it doesn't get any easier than that. But that, those come along. And the thing is, Nowitzki also played his last home game. I didn't play that. And that one got really dicey because they were up 30, and it got down to 5 with like 3 minutes to go. So Phoenix had actually gotten inside the number against Dallas. Dallas did cover. I am disappointed that it did not play part 2 of the Wade thing because they figured to be a no-show in Brooklyn in the last regular season game, and they were. They lost by like 20 or 19, I guess it was. So probably should have been 2-0, but I'll take the 1-0. However, I will be getting involved now that the playoffs have begun because there are some system things that work in the NBA playoffs. They work year after year after year. They're situational, which means you like them. And so I will be playing some NBA now.
And again, you're not having a handicap motivation. It's people are trying to win, which is not the NBA regular season.
Right, and that's the reason that a lot of people don't like the NBA because of the length of the season, and these guys just simply don't come to play every night.
But that said, there's some guys, and I know there's some guys at WagerTalk who had really good seasons in the NBA because that's what they focus on, and they're able to decipher the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, and really produce some nice profits. So my attitude on the NBA is certainly not necessarily a universal or correct attitude.
Absolutely. And guys, they brought the numbers out this morning. I was doing a podcast with Prez and Teddy Covers, and literally they brought the lines out while we were on the air doing it.
CG was first up with them, too.
Yeah, and this is a situation where looking at the playoff numbers and then looking at the series prices, and I said to you guys just before we went on air, with the 8 series that we have, there's 2 series that the numbers stuck out to me. And first off, guys, whenever you talk about NBA futures, I really don't think there's any value in playing futures to win because, one, you're going to be going against Golden State. You know that in the finals. So you're not going to bet Golden State at the number they are. And anybody else, you'd get more money just rolling them over 100%. Series by series.
That's the same thing. In effect, it's the same thing that we said during the NCAA tournament, which is that it is, you want to have that cool-looking future in your pocket, but you can make more staying away from the future where you're not getting true value on anybody, and just roll, if you want to go that route, rolling things over.
And speaking of true value, have you seen some of the splits on these series prices? I mean, we love the house, but boy, I tell you what, man, you're laying big numbers, but you're not getting back there's a big
this
margin.
Isn't, this was from another site that I had. Obviously, we talked to Will earlier today, and, their prices were closer. But there was a site, a book that I wrote numbers down. Milwaukee was 100-1, and they were paying back 20-1 on Detroit.
Yeah.
100-1. CG, I believe their number was 60. Either talking on the radio show or talking to Will, they were 60-1. But 100-1 paying back 20-1 tells you why not to bet a future.
Yeah, but the 2 prices that stuck out to me in the series is we've got a 4-5 matchup with Indiana and Boston. You've got Boston at minus 700, and Dave, I know you're a Boston guy, and this is a far cry from the glory days of the Celtics. And this team, although they've had a lot of love all year, even when they were sitting 3rd, 4th, 5th in the seeding all during the season, they were still one of the favorites to win the. It's like, what is this bias with Boston? Because at no part this year have they shown me the continuity that they're anywhere as good as they were last year, and they should have been better because they had Kyrie Irving back. He missed a lot of last year, and I always blank on the other guy that broke his leg last year. Hayward. You had him back. This is a team that just hasn't been dominant. Now, I know the knock on Indiana heading into the playoffs is they lost a key player late in the season, but this is a team that's only, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead to the next game I'm going to talk about, and that's Portland.
Oladipo did only play 36 games.
Indiana,
yes.
Indiana had injury, but I was thinking of the Portland guy for the next one I'm bringing up. But is this worth, 700, minus 700 for Boston in this series?
Well, let's just talk about this game as a whole then. They're minus 700, Indy's 500. That's not what you expect. If you look at the prices to win the East, Boston's 5-1, the fourth favorite, and Indiana's 150-1. Going to the game on Sunday, Celtics are a 7-point favorite, a total of 211.5. Now, I think it is. I like Boston. Now, they haven't turned the switch on. They haven't played. And Marcus Smart is out the first 2 series. So that's a big loss for Boston because he's a lot of excitement.
But here comes the but, and I know where it's going to be.
But, we talked about it on the radio.
That's
Oladipo played 36 games. After February 1st, when Oladipo was gone and they had their new lineup set, the Pacers were 11-1 against non-playoff teams and only 5-14 against playoff teams. They are a decent defensive team that shut down bad teams, but they cannot win the good teams. They don't have the scoring. I like what Kyrie's going to do taking over. I think Hayward finally got out of his shell. He finished the last 7 or 10 games averaging about 18 points a game. I think that Boston got there last year against the Cavs. Once you've been there and done that, you can win with not turning on that switch. Now, 7-1's way too high, but I wouldn't bet Indiana at 5-1, so that obviously means I still lean with the Celtics. I think the Celtics or Toronto come out of the East.
I definitely think the Celtics will win this series. I'm also not going to lay 7-1 to find out, because there's better ways to go about it if you like Boston. And as far as Indiana is concerned, I have no interest in them early in this series. Where I might get interested in the Pacers is when they return home for Game 3. If they're down 0-2, might be a situation where you can step in and try and get one good effort out of the Pacers. And one of those games where we're not going to get shut out, okay?
Right.
And the NBA playoffs are often a case of being patient and waiting for good spots.
Yeah, and Dave, in talking about some of those good spots, we know the situation in last year. It was such a good play that they were creating. You were actually laying bad numbers to take those teams in the first quarter or first half.
Well, yeah,
with
but you're going
to was still coming home.
Yeah, because they can't make the number bad enough, so to speak, because
in comparison to the full game,
right? And also because you are going to get to borrow one of your expressions, a fat and sassy road team, where they figure, well, we got this thing in the bag, and the other team, look, they're pros. They want to get some salvation out of it, and they're not. No team thinks they're dead at 0-2. Their attitude's always going to be, let's get them now that we're at home.
It's not a series till the home team loses,
right?
And talking about that last year, although Boston got to the finals last year, again, no Kyrie, no Hayward, they were 1-7 on the playoff road. Yeah. So, going back to Indiana, since we're talking about the series here and not just a one-day podcast, this is going to the playoffs. That's something you should keep your eye on. But I will say this again, you talk about the matchup. The Pacers, I think, were number 3 in defense in the league, and that's how they got by without Oladipo. They played solid defense. The Celtics, in their 4 games against the Pacers, averaged 117.6 points per 100 possessions. That's the best out of any playoff team against the Pacers this year in either conference. So Boston has matched up well with this Pacer team.
Good stuff there, Ralph. And the other one jumps out to me. You've got the Portland Trailblazers. This is a team that's 32-9 straight up at home. They have the home court advantage in this series, but Oklahoma City is the favorite for the series number. And
they did not play well down the stretch.
No, they won the few games down at the end that they needed to get.
Well, but
Portland has only lost twice in the last month. Now, they lost New York, and that's a big hit for them. But is it enough to switch them to be a home dog in this series?
I don't know if it is or not, but in the public's mind it is. And I think the public is going to latch on to Westbrook and say, well, this is where he's going to really take over and do his thing. And it's not like he's the only guy on the team.
But when he does do his thing, I think they're a worse team when he's scoring all of the points.
Well, but I don't think he will here. And that's the thing. The two, you can make a strong argument, and that's not taking anything away from Lillard, who's a great player. But the two best guys in the court are probably both on Oklahoma City.
Yeah, I agree.
And
Westbrook and Paul George.
Yeah, and to me, that's potential mismatch material in the NBA playoffs, because this is where the superstars really do step up and shine. So I do think Oklahoma City's going to win this series. No. I think they'll get one of the games in Portland and then take care of business at home.
Now, Marco, I don't think you really should be surprised they opened the dog, because if you looked at what the Western Conference Finals were, and those have been out for forever. I mean, the last numbers last week had Oklahoma City at 16-1, Portland's 45-1. So, I mean, people have been betting this all year regarding what the seeding is. So, I mean, yes, you have an extra home game, but in people's perceptions, OKC is one of the premier teams. It's Houston, it's Golden State, Houston, and OKC.
Portland probably, to me, is one of those teams that probably has more of a regular season home court than a playoff home court.
Yeah, like Denver.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Denver in a bit. But
that's the next one.
OKC, OKC did sweep Portland 4-0 this year, and of all the playoff series, the 8 series, the only other 4-0 sweep was Milwaukee and Detroit. So, you've been there, you've done that. Portland loses Nurkic. He's going to have trouble now with OKC with Steven Williams. They have no big man to cover. I mean, Steven Adams. Excuse me, I said Williams. And then add in Westbrook and George. And the thing about Westbrook is this. I mean, people may not realize how bad of a shooter Westbrook is. He's shooting 29% from three-point land. If he shoots anything in the 35s or 40s where he's shooting like normal, I mean, this could be a sweep kind of situation. So am I surprised? No. Do I think Portland's going to win a game at home? Absolutely. The opening line, you look at this game as game number 2 on Sunday. Indiana-Boston's the first game on Sunday. OKC and Portland's the second game on Sunday. Portland is a 3-point favorite, a total of 225. So, that's going to mean that OKC is only going to be a 5.5-point favorite at home probably.
I think the move here might be, root for Portland to win game 1 and then make a series bet on Oklahoma City at plus money in game 2.
There's a good possibility. The other one, and you touched on it briefly there, Ralph, in your analysis of the last series, you mentioned Denver. Here's a Denver team that's been 1-2 all year in the West. Golden State, prevailed, took care of business the last couple of weeks and secured the number 1 spot. But this Denver team, you want to talk about consistency. This team's been good all year. The number 2 seed, and yet they're only minus 200 to San Antonio. How much is this the pop factor with Popovich as coach of the Spurs? Because,
all of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's Denver's getting no respect.
It's all of it on 2 counts. One is the pop factor. The other is that Denver has been regarded all year as, well, yeah, they were number 1 for much of the season, then number 2, but they're really not that good. So the widespread belief seems to be that they're kind of a fraud, and they're therefore susceptible to getting knocked off here. And I think the public is going to be all over San Antonio. But the sharp money has already shown on Denver to win the series.
Yeah, this is a team that when you keep waiting for it to, I love when people say, and we hear this in baseball a lot, Dave, with advanced numbers and, metrics say, this guy's pitching better than he should be, and they're waiting for the other shoe to fall. Right. Sometimes that shoe never falls, and you keep going against a guy that has mediocre metrics, but he's somehow doing it out on the mound.
They call it the Jeff Locke factor.
Yeah, well, yeah.
From a few years ago, Jeff Locke, who had the worst metrics you'd ever want to see and kept on, and actually made the All-Star team. It was just crazy. Eventually, the regression did settle in.
You lost a lot of money, though, stepping in front of him.
Yeah, I know. I learned a lesson that baseball season, which is wait for the regression to begin before you anticipate it. I kind of feel that way here. I think Denver's got a chip on their shoulder. They know that they're being lightly regarded by most people. But still, in that one game late where, you get a chance to make a statement against Golden State, and they got the living snot knocked out of them. So I just... Boy, I don't.
No question that hurt confidence level somewhere because even if you are second best, it's a big distance between. Yeah. Ralph always likes to talk about the difference between 1 and 2. And there's a big gap there.
Well, they just might not be as good as their record indicates.
Yeah. But that record, 34-7 at home this year, straight up.
Yeah, again, they use the altitude to their advantage. They press the pace, and you talk about, well, Denver's a 200 or a 230 favorite. I know, on the radio earlier we talked with the
Tony
CG guy, Tony at CG, and he said the Sharps jumped on Denver twice to raise their series price up to 230 or 240. And, Denver's a 5.5-point favorite. Yeah, Portland, who's a 3-point favorite against OKC, is actually a series dog. So that shows you something about that series that you said. And, you talk about playoff experience, and, you can win a first-round game, but when you have Pop, San Antonio's made the playoffs for, I think, 20 straight years, not even exaggerating. I think that's what it is now. And Denver, this is their first time since 2013. Now, yes, they may have a chip on their shoulder because people don't respect them as the 2. And, yes, they lost out on the playoffs on the last day last year. So, they put some extra effort in to make sure they get there. To me, in this series, it's a side edge. Denver's got the height. The only person San Antonio has to guard Denver's bigs is LaMarcus Aldridge. And if Denver can pound the ball, they win this series. If San Antonio can get Denver to play small ball because they can control the pace, then the Spurs and Pop pull it away. So it'll be a check and balance game. But after game 1, I think if it's small ball, San Antonio wins. If Denver can control them and get them to play big, then Denver's going to win.
The other one that'll go to, starting with these smaller priced ones, you've got Utah and Houston. And down the stretch, Houston, they looked as good as anybody in the NBA. But they're only...
Well, they had to because they looked so bad at the beginning.
Minus 400 over Utah. You're getting opening number. You were getting 300 back on Utah. This is a team that, we know what they can do. We know that when they're healthy, and last year they were a hamstring away from, taking out the Golden State Warriors. Do they repeat that performance and get themselves another matchup against Golden State this year?
I don't know that it's that easy to flip the switch on, and Houston seems to be the team that could fall victim to that mentality because they just kind of treated the regular season as an exhibition season. But if Houston's right, they're beating Utah. I mean, there's no two ways about it. They're more talented than the Jazz, and one would think now that the playoffs are here, the Rockets will be at their peak form. So I don't think this is that tough a series.
Even as bad as they started the season, as you alluded to, Ralph, this is a team that at home was 31-10 straight up this year, and they exceed being a public team like they are, and Harden getting all of the limelight for what they have 30-some games during that stretch where he was scoring 30 plus every night. They still exceeded the number. They were 23-16 against the spread at home. This is a team that are they still undervalued, or are they just forgetting about Utah here?
Well, you have the number 2 defense in Utah against the number 2 offense in Houston, and the thing is that Houston just goes by their shooting percentage. You look at the Houston offense, and their shooting percentage is second last. I'm looking it up. No, they're not. They're number 24 as a team, shooting 44.9%. So you have a team that you think of offense. And yes, they're number 2 in offense because they're scoring, because they press the pace, because Harden comes down and rips up a shot right away. But, when you have him and CP3 against Utah, who has so many banged up guards, I mean, Corver and Exum and a bunch of guys that are beat up, that I just think Utah, if healthy, would give them a run, but I don't think Utah has the guys, the stability, the people that have played on the court together at the same time. Having Harden and CP3, I don't care if CP3 missed some of the season and Harden missed some of the season. Those guys are veterans that played the entire playoff series last year, and one game playing together, they're going to be back in form that they could play. They're different than other guys. So, it's like Westbrook and George, the same thing. Those guys can miss a lot of games together, but you put them on the court, they know how to play each other. I think Houston's well-deserved to be the favorite that they are. And even the last night, going into the last night of the regular season, at one point, Houston was the 2 seed because they were winning, and the other 2 teams were down by 15 and 25 points. Mm-hmm. But both of those teams came back to win. This first game's on Sunday. Houston's 6 or 6.5, a total of 216.5 or 217. So, you look at value and you'd say, well, Houston is the number 2 favorite in the West. They're a 400 favorite in the series, and they're only laying 6.5, while you have another team, which is a dog in the series, and they're laying 3.5. Yeah. So if you want to put it in perspective that way, there's actually value on Houston with the 6.5.
The Philadelphia 76ers opened up minus 800 against Brooklyn. Now, we know Philadelphia, and Dave, me and you have talked this many times when we did the radio show. You just don't know which Philadelphia team's going to show up. When they play their A game and everybody's playing on the same page, this team's as good as anybody in the East. Problem is, too often this team plays to the level of the competition. They have nights that you just shake your head. How did they lose to this team?
Right.
But this is playoffs, and you're supposed to have focus.
Is. Yeah, and the flip side of that is Brooklyn's overachieved all year, I think, in most people's minds. And while they deserve plaudits for their regular season, you look at the roster and you match it up with Philadelphia, and the 76ers are just better at almost every position. So it's supposed to be a series where the 76ers get through without that much trouble. I'm not comfortable saying that because there just seem to be some maturity issues on this team that prevent them from maintaining that level of consistency. So are they going to be their worst enemy once again? It's possible. Unlikely, but possible.
And obviously when they're healthy, they got one of the deepest teams in the NBA. But, Ralph, sometimes...
We don't know. And, look, we don't know what Embiid's status really is. I mean, you don't know. Is he really hurt? Are they resting him? I don't know. I don't know what.
No, he's really hurt. I mean,
but I'm saying, is he hurt to the point where he's not going to be able to play, or is he still going to be able to go out there and be a factor? To me, it's just an unknown quantity at this point.
Yeah, well, I agree. CG, we talked earlier, they put up a line 7. No one else has put up a line, in this because of Embiid in Game 1. He wanted to play in the regular season finale. He couldn't. He was too banged up, and it's a wait-and-see situation, for those following. They played 18 games without Embiid this year, and that Philadelphia team that's very talented and one of the best in the East went 8-10. Without Embiid this year. And so, you have to put that in as a factor. And, last year, you still have a young team with Philadelphia that won their first playoff series in a long time, but that was a different team. If you remember that 76ers team, they were hotter than anyone down the stretch. I think they went 27-4, something crazy those last 31 games to get to where they were. That carried into the playoffs. They won that first series. And just to put things in perspective, if you're looking at some bad NBA teams, 2 years ago, Brooklyn and Philadelphia were the 2 last-place teams in the Eastern Conference, and look where they are now facing off in the playoffs. As I said, only one place has a line. That was CG Open 7. No total yet out. This is the first game on Saturday, so there'll be plenty of action. It tips off at 11:30 Vegas time, 2:30 Eastern. It's too bad for the sports books that the first game you got a line circled for the first few games. But as that gets closer, obviously, with the Embiid situation, we'll know a lot more.
In Philadelphia, 31-10 straight up at home this year, but they were only 21-20 against the spread, going back to that inconsistency factor with them. Orlando and Toronto, a lot of people think Toronto's the team to come out of the East. This is a team, they were solid at home, 32-9 against straight up. But they were actually a losing record against the spread at home. 18-22 against the spread. A lot of games this year they rested Kawhi Leonard. So that had a lot to do with maybe the point spread because they overreacted or underreacted to him being rested. But is this team worth 1,400?
Yeah, against Orlando. Yeah, I mean Orlando's not a playoff team. They're just in because they have to take 8 teams out of each conference. Otherwise, Orlando's not a playoff team. So, yeah, unless Toronto really sucks it up, they're going to win this series, and they're probably going to win it easily.
And Toronto is a team that has been in the playoffs the last several years. Fires their coach after last year's, start.
Well, you could have beat the Cavs. Yeah. You couldn't advance. And
nobody could beat the Cavs.
Yeah, but you look at what Toronto's done. They made all the right moves. I mean, you get Kawhi on your team. That's going to make you a better playoff team. Then you get Marc Gasol. I mean, that's just adding a whole nother level. Yeah. The way Siakam's playing, I love Toronto. I think Toronto comes out of the East. They're my favorite team to win. And I think, if they're playing good enough and Golden State doesn't have their head in it and gets challenged a little bit, it's crazy to say, but if you have to pick someone else besides Golden State, I would pick Toronto to win it all. If you couldn't pick Golden State, obviously, I think they're going to win. And I think there's value in their first game. I mean, they're laying 8.5. You're playing early on Saturday. I remember them always last year, or 2 years ago, they always got pissed and disrespected because they played the early games, and they never got primetime games because that went to Cleveland, that went to LeBron, that went to Golden State, that went to the other teams. Well, they're doing it again. They're playing the second game in the afternoon, 2 o'clock Vegas time. It is 5 o'clock, but I think that they're moving up a little bit in the daytime. They're playing that second or third slot, but I still think they use it to their edge. I think they blow out Orlando opening game.
Wasn't it until last year, if I remember correctly, didn't they have some kind of stat where they lost the first game of a series? Like how many series in a row?
Yeah, I think you're right.
They finally broke that last year, so I remember that. Hey, Ralph, what do they expect? They're a team on the East Coast, and they're in Canada. Where do they expect to be the Saturday night late game? I mean, where are they going to put them?
I mean, 2 years ago, I think they were the number 1 seed. I think the Cavs were number right early on. But obviously,
the thing is, the Cavs had LeBron, and they're a bigger.
Oh, no question.
I don't care.
But I remember how big of a deal they made of it. It wasn't,
Well, that's okay. If you can derive some extra motivation from something stupid, why not?
I don't know if he's trying to motivate his players, his fans, anything, or just trying to get some news attention and being that he's paying attention to things. But, like I said, I am backing Toronto.
I don't disagree with you. I think they are, the team. It's going to come down to them in Milwaukee. And speaking of Milwaukee, do you want to lay $10,000 to win a?
No, and I don't want any part of the other team. Milwaukee will get rid of Detroit very easily.
Yeah, they dominated this team, and Detroit. You talk about teams that don't belong in the playoffs because they have to take 8. This is a team you got to consider. You got to put
the Pistons. They're really not very good. They're a mediocre team.
And
you had to win the last couple games to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm hoping for is that Milwaukee comes out a little fat and sassy in game 1 and wins, but doesn't cover. Has that narrow win.
That could happen.
And then I'll, get just that little hair of adjustment on the line, and then you get a focused team in the second one. That's where I would look to play Milwaukee because I just don't see Detroit. Right. This is a 5-game series at most. Yeah. I think probably a 4-game series.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, but I think Milwaukee is still new, hasn't been there, hasn't done that. If Detroit beats them in their first home game, that wouldn't surprise me. If Milwaukee plays a couple close games on the road, that wouldn't surprise me. But it's one of those games where you're not going to bet either one on the series because the favorite's too crazy high priced, and the dog can't win the game. So it's just one of those things you just lay off.
And I like to look at we always talk about against the spread records. When you're a marquee team, and let's face it, they got the best player on the team this year in the NBA, in the Greek Freak, with Giannis, and they're 33-8 straight up at home, but they also have a winning record against the spread. And a lot of times when you've got those teams that are laying big numbers night after night, you're not going to have that, and they're still exceeding the point spread, 23-17 against the number at home for Milwaukee.
They are the 7 p.m. Eastern slot on Sunday, the third of the 4th games, with Houston, Utah being the night game. So when you have that East Coast team getting that, it is something to be respected. Only one line out, CG 11.5. So Giannis must be circled for them not to have one out because I don't know anyone else on either team. I know Blake Griffin was injured with a bum knee. I mean, maybe they're holding it out because of Blake Griffin. It must be the case, but. At least Griffin and Andre Drummond's couple bigs can make Giannis work a little bit on defense.
All right. Did we miss any? Oh, Clippers, Golden State.
4-0. Goodbye. No, that's it. I mean,
have you ever seen a series this price? Are you going to go down and lay $50,000 to win a?
Somebody will. Because somebody. People do the bridge jump and stuff all the time where
there's no way in the world they could
amount
lose,
of money
right?
to win a couple $100.
Yeah.
So somebody will probably do it, and they'll win their bet. But it won't be me.
You're minus 180 to win the NBA championship. You're minus 315 to win the Western Conference Final. This is the 8 o'clock Eastern game on Saturday. And the line's 12.5, a total of 232.
This is the perfect example of where you wait for Game 3. and you might get 1 quarter or 1 half out of the Clippers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Marco, something I said on the radio with Dave today, when Golden State has their starting 5 in, they're allowing 95.1 points per 100 possessions. That is 10 points better than any other 5 people in the NBA together. Amazing. So it just puts it out that you think about them as offense, but we know watching them in the playoffs the last few years that they can shut down a team on defense as well. So, we talked about it earlier in the handicapping segment. Keep an eye on these totals because this year has been historic with the average over-under total up over 10 points over the year before. You may get some value with these NBA totals that are going to start off in the playoffs inflated with those other numbers during the regular season, but you're going to see some people playing playoff defense, which we haven't seen all year.
And another point with the Golden State with the defense, not only do they ratchet up even more in the playoffs, but if you're playing them, you want to slow your offense down as well because you can't trade points with them. You've got to try to make every possession count and limit the number of possessions that they get. All right, guys, we went through it all for all of the series, broke it down, gave you some ideas of how we feel about these series. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, well, it's going to be time for best bets. You'll get one each from all 3 of us, and we'll see what Mr. Undefeated Dave Cokin has for us, if it's going to be an NBA play or is he going somewhere else. We'll find out next on the WagerTalk Podcast. Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. Before we jump into this week's best bets, I've got a special offer for everyone. We've got a coupon code, $10 free for you guys for listening to the podcast this week. It's NBA playoff time. It's also NHL playoff time, so we're going to go with Playoffs 10. Just type in coupon code PLAYOFFS and the number 10, and you'll get $10 off any package at WagerTalk. All right, guys, best bet time. Let's start with Dave. Where are you heading for yours? You going hockey, going basketball?
I'll take the Golden Knights in Game 2, and obviously some of that it has nothing to do with my rooting for the Golden Knights, which I will be. But I think that the team that played the worst Game 1 is the team I want in Game 2. As long as they're plus money, you can make a case certainly. Well, Tampa's going to bounce back from their first game disaster, but you're going to have to lay 1,000. Well, it's not 1,000, but
up to 270.
It'll seem like it. Okay, that's a big price, and they've actually got a lot of pressure on them at this point. The Golden Knights just played a really bad Game 1. I still think this is a team they can match up well with, and you're getting about plus 120 here. I'll take the Golden Knights to get back on the board in a game they've got to play well in. And if they lose, that's so be it. But I think you'll see a much better performance in Game 2 than they had in Game 1.
Ralph, where are you heading?
I'm going to go to the NBA in a game we talked about. It's Toronto against Orlando. It's a mismatch. I think Toronto has a lot to prove. I think they have the right people there, the right veterans to get them there. Game tips off Saturday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Open 7.5. It's up to 8.5 across the board. That 7.5 was a real early opener, so don't think you got the worst of the line. That's been the line that's out there now, and I'm very happy with that line. So Toronto Raptors minus 8.5 against the Orlando Magic.
All right, for me, I'm going to go to the NBA, and we're going to give you a series play. We talked about this one, and I just think that the market is overreacting to the pop factor. You look at San Antonio, and this is a team that's a shell of its former self. The Denver Nuggets, they've been consistent all season long. Yes, they've lost that critical game late in the season to Golden State and missed out on the number 1 seed, but they've been there all year. And the fact that everybody's talking about San Antonio, and, you got Popovich in this series, Denver being new to the playoffs, don't have that playoff experience. We got a number that was, I feel, just entirely way too cheap. It opened up at minus 200. We are looking at minus 240 right now on the series price. It's still, in my opinion, way under where this market should be. You've got a number 2 seed against a number 7 seed, and that number 2 seed was, battling, against Golden State. So you talk about a big discrepancy as far as the 2 and the 7 here, and you look at some of the other series prices of what they are with this kind of seeding, and this number is just way too low in my opinion. I'm going to go ahead and take the Denver Nuggets. I think they get by San Antonio. Maybe it'll be a different story when they get to the next round. But my best bet for the podcast is take Denver to win the series over San Antonio. All right, guys, I want to thank our guest tonight, William Bernanke. Always enjoy him stopping by and letting us take a peek behind the counter. Big thanks to Ralph Michaels and Dave Cokin for joining me in studio. And Mr. Mark Seidel for making sure we sound good. And
those that watched the Showtime series saw Mark behind the thing there, and his head's gotten real big. So
it's if you guys have ever been in a radio studio booth, they're small. I mean, he's taking his head so big, he's sucking in a lot of oxygen out of this studio right now. And, I'm getting a little lightheaded. Right? We got to get out of here so I can go outside and get some fresh air. Thanks, Mark. We appreciate you. And a big shout out to Johnny Detroit. Him and his staff back in Michigan make sure that the podcast gets out to everybody. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can find us on Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and, of course, last but not least, I want to thank you guys, the listeners. No podcast if nobody's listening, and you guys are listening, and that's why we're here each week. And for myself, Marco D'Angelo, until next week, guys, cash some tickets. We'll talk to you next week.